Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Just giving people a minute here as I see the number of participants are trickling in. As usual, we have people from all over the world. So good morning to people in California and the US, and good afternoon and evening to folks in uh, Europe and Asia and Australia. All right, let's get started. I'm Sean from Servoy, and this is the 2025.6 product update. Originally, we had on the speakers list myself and our CEO, Ron, and Victor. Both of them are unable to join. However, I'm joined by Tuan Nguyen, who's a senior expert in the US, and Bianca, who's helping us to set up this webinar. So they're going to help me on time and on questions. Tuan, you can see my screen. I just want to double check before we get going.
Yep, I see your screen.
Okay. Well, this is the product update. For those of you that haven't been to one of these before, we have a lot to cram in an hour, so I try to jump right into the demos and go quickly. And we can answer questions on the way and also leave some room at the end. But we pretty much just go right to the demos and show you what's new in this release. We'll get into it. Just before we get going, in your Zoom toolbar, there is a questions panel. You can type your questions into there anytime. Tuan is going to be patrolling that. He can answer them silently, or he can interrupt me, or he can save them to the end. So just type in whenever you get an idea. We are recording this, so don't worry about taking screenshots or anything. You can just kind of follow along, and at the end, we'll share the recording and the sample solution and the slide deck. We post that on the forum after every webinar. I don't have any polls for you, so don't worry about the polls, but just use the questions, and let's get into it. So today in this release, I'm going to go over some of the key features. This release has a lot of kind of developer-focused features that are better ways to do things. It's not anything that you couldn't do already in Servoy, so not any big new capabilities, but it's more like making the developer experience better, making it easier to manage your code. I'll also get into some of the ServoyCloud updates at the end. I just have a few kind of animated screenshots of that. We'll go through the release notes on that pretty quickly at the end. Mostly we're focused on what's new in the core IDE. I'll go over the form level CSS, which is kind of the biggest new feature. And then there were some enhancements to some of the other developer APIs we'll get into. So the first demo, we're just going to get into form level CSS. What is that? As you know, in the NG clients, NG1 and Titanium, you can style your solutions with CSS or less, actually. And the way it worked before is you would include the style sheets at the solution level, and then you would implement the bindings to the classes on components and forms and such. It all still works the same way. However, now we've added that each form gets its own less file, and it overrides the global styles. And so it really helps to encapsulate your CSS, especially if every time you implement a class that you only use in one place, but it goes in the global style sheet, you end up with a really huge style sheet that's kind of a mess to maintain. And this is a much nicer way to do it. So let's get into it. I'm going to switch my screen share. I'll turn my camera off too. And while we do the demos, and switch my screen share over first to Servoy Developer. Tuan, can you confirm that you can see Servoy IDE?
Yep, I see it.
Okay.
Yep.
So I set up like a really kind of like hello world example for just to introduce the concept, and then I do a second demo that's a bit more real world and a bit more advanced. So the way things always worked is you have your solution here. In your media, you have any number of assets, including typically like the main less file for the solution, which I have here, this webinar 2025.6.less. I put a class in it my button, which just kind of gives a few options on the button. And without doing anything else, anywhere you apply that class, it's going to be the same. So I have like a base form with the button, and then child form A, child form B, they inherit from the base form. I'm going to show how you inherit from the global style sheet into the form, and then inherit from the form into the base forms, and how that all works. What you will notice is that on any one of these forms in the form editor, across the bottom here where you have the form parts and the tab sequence, the security tabs, they've always been there. There's this new tab called the less tab. And here you get your own less file for sort of overriding or implementing your own CSS or less on that form. Quickly, I'm going to switch back to my browser and out of the presentation. So the way this looks right now is I have my base form, and then I have form A and form B, and you can see on these, the button that I have looks the same on all of them, and they're all just getting that from the top level style sheet. Switching back to the IDE, what I'm going to do is first come in here to the base form, and I'm going to uncomment some code I had here. So suppose that I just want to override what's in the main style sheet, or maybe this doesn't even exist in the main style sheet. It really doesn't matter, but it's nice to show that you can override individual properties. So I'm going to add the text transform to make everything uppercase. I'm going to save that. I'm also going to add, uncomment this. I put some modifier here on the hover to change the color when you do the mouse over. And if I switch back to the browser, you can see now that when I mouse over, I get that, and it's across all the forms. And also the text transform made the font force it to uppercase. So that's example one. And what's important to note is that I added this, but I still get the background color and the text color from the global style sheet, but I added the text transform, and I also added the hover modifier. And I didn't do anything to the child forms yet. They just inherited along from the base form. By the way, just to show how that works, you can see way down here in the bottom right, I have this extends form, and that's showing that these inherit from that example base. I can go to the less tab of these child forms, and I have some code here to uncomment. So now what we're doing is taking it a step further. These inherit and override from the base form. So in form A, I'm going to just change the background and foreground color to something custom to this form. And in form B, I'm just going to change the border radius and make it a bit rounded. Okay, so now if I switch back to the browser, so now you can see that I have the base form, which just looks like it did before. Form A, you see that the color has changed, the background color, and form B, and the foreground color. And form B, it stays the same, but I put the rounded corners in there. So it's pretty fine-grained control. What you can do, you can mix in and out of that class and override properties completely, or add properties that didn't exist, and then you inherit all the rest from the global to the base form to any child forms that might use form inheritance. You can imagine that if I have 100 forms in a solution, and each one is doing a little bit of customization here and there, the way it used to work is that everything would go in the global style sheet. I'd have to give a unique class name to everything, and then map it onto that component everywhere. And it creates a real maintenance mess, an encapsulation problem, and this cleans it up nicely. So that's example one. Like a real world example is what I'll show next, and also a way that that makes this really, I think, useful in developing solutions. And that's using CSS Grid to lay out the forms in a responsive application. And I'll just show you 2 forms next. Example 1, this is like a product detail form with some fields on it. I've laid this out using CSS Grid to show the fields, in 2 columns here in these sections with the gray background with some buttons over here on the right-hand side. And I'm using CSS to do all of the layouts. And then I have an identical form here. Oh wait, I'll show you where it's not identical. I switched the column layout in CSS. I meant to show it to you first and then uncomment the code, but I'll just show you the line of code that's different because you'll get the idea. So this is the exact same form. I changed 1 line of CSS in my layout, and I'll show you how I did this and talk about how it applies to a real solution in general. So switching back to the IDE. So I have, let me close all of these tabs here. And I have CSS responsive example 1 and 2. And I'm gonna just switch right over to that less tab again and show you what I've done. So in this case, what I did is I built the first form and then I duplicated it. And then I just changed the CSS a little bit. So again, this is using CSS Grid to lay things out. If you go down to the field grid, which actually is the container in which those fields and labels are nested, because there is an outer grid as well. This has this line 38 here, grid template columns, and you can see that it's a 4-column layout. And then in the one that I duplicated and changed, what I've done is commented out that one, and I replaced it with that it does the min max, or it does the max content, and then it arranges them in like a single column there, and that's how you get the 2 different layouts. Now, if you're looking at this and you're saying, yeah, I don't know much about CSS, let alone CSS Grid, that makes 2 of us, because I'm not very good at CSS at all. But fortunately, AI chatbots are really good at CSS. So I just plugged in like, hey, I want to have a 4-column layout with labels and fields in my Servoy solution. Can you generate the CSS containers? And I just described a bit that I want to have those the section header and then the buttons at the bottom right. And it gave me all of the classes that I need with all of these properties in it. I just had to map them onto the components in the editor. So it's really helpful these days that you can generate CSS layouts with an LLM in a few seconds, and it works pretty well. Some of these other classes in here are related to the next demo that I'm going to show. So it really wasn't that much code. But the point is that number one, you can use CSS Grid pretty quickly to get these nice responsive layouts. But more importantly, because you could do that before, I would have to have all of this content kind of in my global style sheet in duplicate almost 2 times. And then I'd be mapping those onto the components of my forms and trying to figure out how I want to change it. And I could have a bunch of different layouts in a large solution. You can imagine that I'd have thousands of lines of code in the global style sheet. But here I can really encapsulate it to the form, and I can just keep everything nice and organized. And going back to the first example I showed, this also works with form inheritance. So I could, I could have layouts that are mostly the same, but then I tweak it a little bit, and then I get really nice control with that example. I'm going to pause there before switching back to the slide deck to do a quick review. Do we have any questions?
We do. Thanks for that explanation, though, Sean. We have one question from Robert. He's asking, how is this implemented in the file system? because typically you'll have a .less file, right? But now we have it per form. How does that look like in the file system, the file structure? He
That's a
asked
great,
because,
yeah.
yep, he typically edits the less file in a different type of editor, not necessarily
Yeah,
Servoy.
good. Yeah, it's right there in the workspace. Let me see if I can show it. That's a good question. Yeah, the editor here is not the best. Let me just get show where that's at. Um, so let me switch over to my Windows Explorer here. Can you see the Windows Explorer, Dwan?
Yes, I see it now.
Yeah, so this is the forms directory of the solution in the workspace. So this is where you typically see these FRM and the JavaScript files. It just sits beside the form.
Okay.
And it's just like the JavaScript files where the naming convention drives it. So you have the form name, the FRM file name, and then you have the same file name, but the extension is .less, just like the extension for the JavaScript is .js.
Very good. Straightforward.
Yeah.
Hopefully that.
Yeah. So
that helps.
you're free to edit these in another editor if you need to do that. Any other questions while I'm still in the IDE or on that topic?
Nope, I don't see any more coming in yet. I see some comments from Johan, but that's about it.
What I said wrong, probably. We'll deal with that at the end. Okay, then I'll switch back to introduce the next topic from current slide. So yeah, these recap slides are meant more for when I share the slide deck out, but just so you know, it overrides from the top level style sheets, and then you can even use form inheritance and it overrides the base form. And try it out. It's a really nice way to stay organized. If you're starting a new project, I would definitely use it right off the bat. If you have an old project, I would consider, maybe planning a refactor at some point just to take down some of that technical debt. It'll surely help you in the future. About the roadmap of this feature, two things that I would say. Number one, as I said, I don't know much about CSS, let alone CSS grid and flex layouts. It's super LLM friendly. And this is maybe a bit of foreshadowing of things that we're looking at that potentially in the future we have like a layout manager type thing where we could just generate it. And it's not that you even have to go in and and do this stuff by hand. That's a bit more abstracted using the AI to help us. The other thing that I didn't show is actually using less. Everything I did was just regular vanilla CSS. You can use less. These are less files. Right now, we don't support getting the variables from the global setting into the form setting. So if you reference those, I think right now it doesn't work. So for theming and things, that's for the next version. And then you'll be able to fully go with less type theming inside your form files. Okay, next demo. So that was the big feature of this release, I think, in terms of new stuff. But the next one is easy to demo, so I want to show it. This is just how to dynamically enable and disable or show and hide components, what you could always do through code. But now you can connect it to a data provider, so you make it a bit more implicit. You write less code. It's a bit nicer architecture. It's a bit more MVC separation of UI and state and everything. So I'm going to do a quick demo of that. Switching back to the IDE. Okay, so let's. Well, I'll leave those up because I'm actually using those two forms. So let's jump into the design of, well, really either one of these because they're identical. Something that I want to do on this form is that when the inventory gets low, I want to show a little warning icon next to the field here and a button to order more. Now, you didn't see those in the last demo because they're hidden because the stock level was fine. But if the units in stock falls below, plus the units on order falls below the reorder level, then I want to give the user the option to order more and sort of warn them of that. So the way you would typically do that is you would use the runtime reference to the component, and you'd say, elements dot, what is this guy called, button dot, visible equals false if, and anytime the data model changes, you would go and you would run that code. So you'd have to be kind of checking for different events. So potentially just to have this little, thing turn on and off, what should be a stupid little feature, you'd be writing maybe a little bit of code to do it, but then some other code in other places to check for it, and not so nice for maintenance and encapsulation. So what we've done instead is, if I put, I'll also select this icon here because they have the same thing, this visible data provider. We added this property, and then we have this one over here, which I'm not showing in this example, but the enabled data provider. And what that lets you do is connect it to a calculation or a form variable that returns a Boolean value, true or false, so that anytime the data model is updated, your component can just respond. So you don't have to trap events and then do elements.myElement.visible, blah, 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 right? So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to click into this calculation. We are on the products entity. So these are calculations on the products entity. And I have this low stock warning, which is, it just simple, it returns a Boolean, units in stock plus units on order is less than reorder level. That means you have low stock, and that component will automatically show and hide. So let's take a look at what that looks like in the browser. Come back over here. So if I come in and change the reorder level to, say, 200, now this means that I should reorder the product when the units in stock and the units on order falls below 200. So as soon as I hit enter, you can see that these guys become visible. If I change another field, say I had 1,000 units in stock, again, they hide. So it's completely dependent on the data itself. I'm not trapping any events. Moreover, the data could change from, it could be changed while you're running code. It could be changed from a data broadcast, anything like that. You would also have to trap those events. So to get a really foolproof, little stupid exclamation mark next to your field, you potentially have to listen to a lot of different things. And this is way easier. You just write that one-liner calculation and hook it up, and then bind it to the component, and you're done. So pretty simple demo there. You can see it also renders on, when I navigate to this form, it's already displayed, and it renders nicely because I'm using that nice CSS grid layout. So you can use it, that same calculation in multiple places. So that is demo number 2. I'll pause real quick. Dwan, do we have any questions about that?
We do not.
Okay, I hope
yeah,
that
very
means
powerful.
it was straightforward. Yeah.
Straightforward. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'll kind of just skip this slide. I explained everything already. This is just more for when we send you guys the slide deck. Give it a try. Let us know if it works for you.
Oh, well, a question did just pop up.
Yeah.
Terry's asking, how is this invoked? And I think you did answer that. You can use the calculation, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the again, it's called a visible or enabled data provider. So you bind it to a calculation or a form variable that is a Boolean value. I think calculation is more common because then it's really right on the data. It sits right on the data model, but it doesn't have to be a calculation. And then it changes automatically. Anytime that the data model's touched, those calcs get refreshed, and you're good to go.
Yep.
So,
and then another question from Robert. Is this going to be available for all control types, or is it just for certain elements?
Robert is asking me all the good questions that I'd forget to so we give him a gold star. Yeah, great question. I showed that it was on a button and a label. anything that's inherits from like the base component has this. So all components already have a visible and enabled property typically. And so then they also get that visible enabled data provider property. So again, it's nothing you couldn't do before, just way easier, way nicer. If you're starting new solutions or new screens, definitely use this right off the bat. And again, for old stuff, you know, plan that in your refactor to get rid of excess code and pay down some technical debt.
Mhm.
All right. Something else that we added was async mode for the raw SQL plugin. In the last webinar, I think in the last product update, we added async mode for the HTTP plugin. It might have been 2 releases ago. Now I can't remember. And the HTTP plugin had async mode already, but it was with a callback, I think, which is fine, but promises are what we do is we use promises here, and they're a bit nicer, and I'll show how that works. But essentially, when you run a raw SQL plugin, maybe you just fire off an update or a stored procedure or something like that, and you don't know how long it's going to take. You don't want to block the UI and the client while you do that. You can do it now in async mode and it won't block. And moreover, you can still handle a callback. And in fact, you can chain all the callbacks or sort of bundle all the callbacks together and do something when they all finish. So you could fire off a bunch of things and then you don't know what order they're going to go in. More importantly, you don't know what order they're going to finish, but you want to do something when they're all done. But you don't want to block the user from using the application. So I put together a kind of simulation of how this could work in a demo, and I'll try to take you through it and show you how it works. But it's pretty easy. Go back to the IDE. Actually, while we're here, why don't I just show it to you and then I'll show you the code. Going to the async queries example. So going back to this idea of these products that have low stock, what I'm going to do is receive. Suppose this is like a an inventory module, and I have some receiving on like a shipping dock or something. I get products in, and I want to update my inventory that I have received those products. In my example, I did it with a stored procedure. Probably everything I show you, you would just do in a solution. I don't know why you would use a stored procedure, but some people have all their business logic already in stored procedures or REST APIs or something like that. So this is a good example for those kind of use cases. But essentially, each product here that I'm going to receive, I call a stored procedure for and run it. And then I'm going to call them all together, but I get the results back, in whatever order they arrive. So I'm just going to select a bunch here and click my receive items. Okay. And you can see the little processing label at the bottom. I can click around in my phone. Well, they already finished. I was going to show you, I can click around. Let's try that again. I'll do some more here. So, and what that thing is going to do, just to explain this, is it's going to take the units that are on order and just sort of add them to the stock level and then zero out the units that are on order, sort of like they were coming and they arrived and we update the stock level. So I'll do that again, receive items, and I can click around. So it's not blocking as those are running. I'm getting those notifications on the right there. Oh, it's done. Okay. The notifications fade out. I go back and you can see that kind of weird the way the selection might have reordered or something, but those items that I selected are all now zeroed out on order and the stock level has been updated. Just to show you that I'm not tricking you, I'm going to switch over to PG admin. And this is the definition of that stored procedure. So it's calling an update to units in stock, and it's just adding the units of stock to the units on order, and then it's also setting the units on order to 0. Then I do this PG sleep, and I'm delaying the actual procedural SQL to simulate, because it takes like 2 milliseconds. So I want to make it kind of laggy so that you get the, for the demo purposes. That's actually a parameter that I passed in. I just took a random number from 1 to 5 seconds, right? So that's my stored procedure definition back in the IDE. Let me close these. I don't need them anymore. Back in the IDE for my products form here. Here's the bulk receive method. So this is the method that's connected to that button. There's going to be, if you haven't worked with promises in JavaScript or in Servoy, that's kind of a new thing here. So I'm declaring an empty array of promises that I'm going to kind of keep track of my sort of callbacks or my promises. You don't have to do this if you just want to fire and forget it. But it's nice if at the end you want to know when they've all completed. You kind of have to keep track of them because you're gonna keep tabs on them. The next sort of few lines of code, I'm just iterating over the found set. I hope this looks familiar to people. I generate a random, amount to sleep between 1 and 5 seconds. Then here, this is the line of code we're interested in. Execute SQL async. And I pass in the SQL is just calling that stored procedure. I pass in the product ID that I want to update and that random sleep value. So each product update or each receive of the product is a different amount. That's why those notifications were not coming in the order that I selected or anything. It was totally randomized. So what that does is it returns a promise. At the same time, you can call on that promise. So you can sort of chain the calls together, a dot then and a dot catch. Now you don't have to chain it together like this. You could get the promise and do promise dot then, right? So if it looks a bit confusing, you can do it different ways. You can ask ChatGPT for help with constructing a promise too. If you're like me, you need a bit of help there. So what I did is that this is like the callback. You pass in a function inline, and this is what happens. So each time a product gets updated, I'm telling you with that little toaster message, by name, the product was received successfully, right? And then if there's an error, then it calls back with the error value. So that part is executed later when the promise is sort of fulfilled, right? The then part, you're sort of passing that in as a callback. It iterates over all the records. It creates the call with the promise. And then down here, I'm adding it to the array of promises, saying like these are all of the callbacks or the promises that I want to see handled. Next, I use the class level method promise.all on the array of promises. So this is sort of like the last thing that gets executed after each promise has been fulfilled. Then I might want to do some cleanup. In this case, I want to call flush all clients cache because anytime you use the SQL plugin, as many of you know, the Servoy cache is now invalid, and you want to call flush all clients cache for that table, which can be an expensive operation because it affects all connected clients. And so if you call that in the for loop, then you potentially do a kind of a performance boo-boo. So here I wait until they've all completed, and then I showed that dialog that everything's finished. I also processing equals false is a little form variable, and going back to the previous example, the little label that showed that it was processing, and then the label hid. I don't know if you saw that at the bottom of the screen. It was using the visible data provider from the last example. So hey, anytime you want to show and hide something, use the data provider, not the runtime property. So that just hides that at the very end. It makes it go away. One thing that I want to point out is that sorry, it doesn't. I confused myself. It doesn't hide it at the end. It shows it at the end, and that's why I wanted to point this out. So let me back up. Processing equals true happens here. Processing equals false happens here. So this is the label being shown and the label being hidden. This line of code is executed immediately. I know that it's at the very bottom of my method, and that's confusing. But remember that this is async. So everything up until line 73 there is kind of setting up that, you know, all of those calls to that stored procedure and what's going to happen when they're done, including that dialogue. This line of code here happens immediately. So when I first set this up, I just put application.output for everything, and you can see that it hits that line first, and then the callbacks, and then the tailing callback here with the promise.all. So that's the order of events there. So that's async events. I know it's a little bit confusing to go through, but again, we're going to share this example. This is also available on stored procedures. So here I actually did execute SQL, even though it was a stored procedure. But you can call stored procedures, the different method via async. It's also available on the HTTP plugin, as we showed before. So just a nice way to do things. Other thing I want to point out is that promises are available here, but they're not available generally in Servoy. Some people might get confused by that. I'm going to go back to the browser here and just go over the this again. Promises are not for general use in Servoy, because the Servoy client is actually single-threaded. Just that these are done kind of under the hood, async, and then you can't just create promises and use them in Servoy willy-nilly. They're only connected to these kind of APIs where we are in control of the callback under the hood. So I just wanted to point that out. Potentially other API in the future might be made asynchronous. Let us know if you're interested in that.
Yep. I
Okay.
think Paul, there was one question from Paul, and he did ask if there are plans to support async await keywords, I think for general use, I'm guessing.
That's a good question for our R&D team. I think at this time there are no plans for that. I don't think we want to get into that. It's my understanding that you know, that one of the nice things about Servoy is that it is a single threaded client session to the developer, to the Servoy developer. That makes things way easier to manage. It also makes things safe. The moment you start opening things up to asynchronous more generally, you get kind of a thread safe potential issue there. So as far as I know, we don't have any plans. I would be interested to see the use case for general, you know, using promises in general. So feel free to contact me directly or create a feature request for something like that. Okay, one more main demo here, and then we'll get into a bit of the Servoy Cloud stuff and hopefully still get out of here on time. Last product update, the 2025-03 one, we introduced the Events Manager. It made supporting custom events possible or much easier to do. You could do it before purely in code. So we have an update to that. We added essentially better support for your own custom events, in that you can declare them you know, at design time, and then you can expose those to handlers in the solution level and at the form level, and they bind directly to it. You don't have to programmatically add and remove listeners and worry about if a form is destroyed or not. That gets handled for you under the hood. So if you are doing custom events, this makes it a lot easier and kind of a lot like safer, and also less code. So let's get into it. This one is kind of walking through the IDE and explaining a bit. So bear with me here. Because it requires a bit of explanation. Okay, let's go to, well, actually, let me show it first in the browser. I'm sorry. Probably easier to do that. Last example here, events example. Dwan, you can see my browser, right? Just want to make sure I didn't. Sometimes I switch and.
Yeah, nope, I can still
Okay.
see it. Yep.
Okay, so I first do like a hello world example here. The use case for this is that you have something happening. You have a form nested inside another form, right? And each form has its own internal state, its own business logic, etc. You want it on the outer form to do something when the state of the inner form changes. Typically, this is like a UI state, not a data model, because Servoy already propagates all the data model changes throughout the client, right? So that's handled for you. But if your UI state changes on a form, then the other form doesn't know about it. And the way people will typically handle this is they'll essentially break encapsulation. They will have references between forms. They'll have things like either the outer form says, forms.innerform.elements. Blah blah blah, or what's worse is the inner form is talking about the outer form, and the inner form should never do that because it could be in a container in one form and then later in a container in another form. So that breaking of encapsulation is potentially pretty bad, and it's also way more code and overhead than you need. So all I want to do here is pretty stupid example, but whenever I change the value of this in the inner form, the outer form label changes, and the button here is enabled and disabled. So I have to make a selection to continue. So I select on, right, and then it says good job, now click OK, and this button becomes enabled. And again, if I don't have a selection, it changes back, right? So woohoo, pretty fancy example. But what's happening is that the outer form is watching the state of the inner form and being notified. The way you would have to do this previous to this release is you would kind of on load or on show, you would programmatically register the listener, and you'd say, events manager.add list, which you can still do, add listener, to this form for this event, etc. I'm going to show you now how you can directly bind to it and watch it there. So switching now to the IDE. Okay, so we have two forms here. Example event source, which is the inner form, and example event listener, which is the outer form. And then trying to open that. I double click on my touchpad is not so fast. Open in form editor. There we go. So then on, I have these two forms, right? So you can see that this is the inner form and this is the outer form with the form in the container. But first, what I want to show you is that at the solution level, so when I click the active solution, you will see down here event types, which we had before, but now we have this property called UI event, and it's not really necessarily a UI event, but it's sort of where it appears in the UI of the IDE. So you can select now that it can be none, it can be something that you still programmatically register for, but you can also have it at form level or at the solution level. So for this one, I have it at the form level, which means it's going to show up on all my forms. You have a description, which when you handle it actually goes into the comment block of the handler. And then every event handler can have the return type, so the thing that it returns back to the where it was fired from, and the arguments that get passed into it, right? So in this case, it's just a Boolean that the selection ready, like the user had a selection. The event's always passed in. So that's how you set that up. So you have a custom event. Then at the form level, so I'm on my outer form here, you can see we have this new property here, custom events, and you can go ahead, it will show all of your ones that of type form that show up there, and then you double click here and you can create it. And when you create it, I'll just sort of click into this one. It will stub out the method signature for you with the JS docs on the parameters and the return type, and even the description up here comes from that entry. So what you declared gets kind of injected here, and then it's your job to put in the body of it here. So this is the selection ready is what's passed in when it's fired. So I'm not saying anything about what's happening in the inner form. I'm just waiting for saying I'm interested in this event and this is what I'm going to do. When it gets passed in, I should have used the enabled data provider here. Shame on me. I just did the button enabled equals selection ready, which is also a Boolean. So that's how it gets handled. How does it get fired? If we go into the event source and we look at the on data change of, in this case, the component here, this works as it did before. I just call events manager, excuse me, fire events listener, and then I tell it the event type, the context, which in this case can be null, and the selection thingy. So this is, in this case, it's actually a string. So I did that. It's not null and it's not empty string, because it actually, when you select the empty value, it's empty string. So I had to put both. So essentially that gets fired and it gets picked up and listened to. You could do this before. The big difference is that now it shows up in the form under these custom events on all my forms, right? So it doesn't have to be about this one particular inner form. It could be some global thing that can happen in my solution that if I want to know about it and handle it, I just have to register here, and then it gets fired centrally. And there's no crosstalk between forms or between scopes or anything like that. Really nice for encapsulation, and it cuts down on your code. So that's the first example. The second example is, you'll notice that there was a form type event and a solution type event. The difference is that the solution shows up on the solution level. Now, why would you put a solution level event? The best use case for that is that you have a big application, say an ERP, and you have modules, and you have modular development. And this is common in a well-architected, enterprise solution, that you have a whole event model that encapsulates things that can happen, that get broadcast, that you want to listen to about, say, the inventory module or the general ledger or whatever. And you want to define the event model inside the module, and then in the outer solution, you just want to observe and respond to it. So in this case, what I've done is, down here in my modules, I created a little module called My Module. It doesn't really do anything, but it does declare an event type module state change, and it has the old state and the new state. And I can fire it when my module state changes. So I'm listening to something that happens inside my module, could be anything, and I want to know. So that module, it brings its own event model. If I look at the code for this module doesn't do anything, but it has a scope, and inside that scope, it has a set module state. The module state is off or on. It also has a value list for the off or on. That's what you saw in the form a minute ago. And here, the default is to off, but I can pass in the new state. Interesting here, before I set the state, I fire the event, because this event can be blocked. I didn't show that. Let me go back and show that in the event model of this module. Sorry if I'm confusing you guys. So I'll pause again here. You see the return type here says Boolean, and it says false to revert the block state change. So this is a really common, if this is new, understand this is a really common software development pattern for big complex systems, that you have event models, and event models can be blocked. There could be a before event and an after event, and the before event can block, but the after event happens after it happens. So this is kind of like a before model state change. Because what happens is you fire the event to all interested listeners, they all return a Boolean value, and you do the logical OR on that. And if any of them are false, then this value from the event manager is false. I think we showed this in the last webinar, so you can get a more comprehensive view of this if you go back and watch that recording. But if it is accepted, then I set the value of the model state, and I log it, right? Because that's after the event's been handled and it was okay, right? So then I just changed the value of that variable. So that's what it looks like in code. The only thing I need to show you now is the handler, because I showed you where it's fired. So way back up in here and inside my main solution, you'll see that I have custom events, and lo and behold, there's model state change. Again, when you implement it, it will stub out the method signature and the comment blocks for you. There's the old state and the new state. And here I show a dialog and I say, hey, the module state is about to change. Do you want to allow it or do you want to cancel it? And then I return if they allow it, if they click continue, right? And remember, there can be multiple listeners to any broadcast event. If one of them vetoes the event, then the event is blocked, right? That's the way it works. So let's go ahead and run this, switching I lost my Zoom control. Okay, switch to my screen share. back to this guy. And the way I did this is I just kind of carried on with this example that, remember, it was off by default, or it was null here. So when I switch it to on, I'm going to click continue, and it says, hey, the internal state is about to change to on. What do you want to do? And I click cancel, and it doesn't change. All I did was log it in the application.output. I can do it again, and this time I click continue, and then it does change. So you can see that that's handled by the handler. If I look back in to the IDE, well, there's a lot of stuff in my console, but probably we can throw that out and go to the bottom. Yeah, way down here at the bottom, you can see first the module state change was blocked, and then it was accepted the second time I showed it to you. So that's kind of the mechanics of how it works. I leave it up to you guys to figure out how to get creative with this, but it's a good software development pattern to use. Okay, we got 7 minutes left, and I got to go over the Servoy Cloud updates, but for these, they're not demos, so I'll just burn through them about 1 minute at a time. We'll try to get out of here on time. And we'll take a couple questions at the end. So every quarter we do a product update, and that's a comprehensive product update to our extensions and components, to our core IDE and application server, and also to the Servoy Cloud DevOps pipeline and production environments as well. There's a lot of updates every quarter to Servoy Cloud. So this some of the webinars we focus on them. This particular one, my colleagues gave me some of these demos for you. I'll go through them quickly, but we won't dive into it unless we have questions. Number one, the properties template file. This is the configuration per pipeline job, really. These are the configurations that get passed into the environment, such as the number of servers, the plugin properties, etc. This is always a source of frustration when you're building and the build fails, or there's a problem. It completes, but there's a problem on the environment that it's deployed to. A common one is that the server number of database servers is wrong. It doesn't match the entries or something, right? And then it doesn't really show you, and you have to go in and figure out what the problem is. Here, you just go to the pipeline, and you can look, oh, what are the Servoy property templates that I'm passing in for configuration? This is what's under revision control when this job builds. So you can go in and look at each pipeline branch and see what's going on. It's way easier to troubleshoot problems with the build. Next example, mirrored repositories. So the Servoy Cloud pipelines, they build connected to Git and SVN. If you still use SVN branches, you can have as many pipelines as you want with as many branches as you want. We've always supported remote, what we call remote repositories, which are repositories that are not hosted in Servoy Cloud. We have flexibility, so you can keep your repositories in GitHub or on a private Git repository. We used to connect directly to that. You typically would have to whitelist our Bastion IPs out of our cloud, and there's could be concerns about doing that. So what we do now is implement an actual mirror. So we can just mirror those repositories, which means that you can just build from a mirrored repository that stays in Servoy Cloud, but keep your repository wherever you like, and it just works, and it's more secure and it's easier to troubleshoot. So if you have your own hosted repositories, think about moving to mirrors. For the Agile project management, every release, we are making improvements here that get closer and closer to something like a Jira. We have watchers now, so you can add watchers to tickets. So when a ticket gets a comment or the description changes or something, the watchers get emailed. Additionally, you can see the little @mention tag that's getting typed into the comment block there. Those trigger an email, so you can do mentions and say, hey, take a look at this to your colleague, and they can get notified about that. So again, why pay for Jira to build Servoy applications when you can get it all included here in the pipeline? And it's sort of simplified and easier to manage. You don't have crazy configurations. So I recommend you look at that. Any questions, Duan? I have just a couple more.
No, nothing as of now.
Okay. Next one is to restore database from environment. What do I mean? So in Servoy Cloud, you have multiple hosted environments. They could be non-production environments like development and testing, or they can be production hosting environments or pre-production environments. In those cases, each environment has its own set of databases, right? So what's common is that people like to take something out of production, a snapshot of a database, and then load that into a testing environment or development environment to use the data from that. Commonly, this is to do some troubleshooting or some analysis, or it could just be that you want to keep a good set of sample data up to date that has all the complexity that you would normally have in production. Now what you can do is you can just capture that backup out of the one environment and restore it to the other environment. So this is I think a really big feature for folks that need a good sample data in their development and testing environments. I think this is currently supported for Postgres only. Maybe someone from Servoy Cloud team could help me with that. But I think right now it's just Postgres. But we can open it up for the other environments. Okay, webhooks. This is, I think, a pretty cool feature. As you get more and more deep into automating your development and your DevOps with Servoy Cloud, you may want to get notifications on your message tools about changes. We've been doing this internally on Zoom for a long time with all of our, the forum, our support center, our Servoy Cloud itself, to different teams that we want to be notified when stuff happens. You can do the same thing here. We have support for Zoom, Slack, and Teams, I think. And that can be connected to the project management side. So here you can see it's when a ticket is made or modified. It can also be connected to the DevOps side. So if you want to know that a build failed or something, and there's different, you can see in the config, well, here's the example of the message here, right? So that's being posted to Zoom that that the ticket was entered. But you can see that you can configure it to the pipeline as well. I think when you see the, well, I'll let you guys get the slides. It shows the different things where you can configure like what you want to receive webhooks on in the next part. That is all of the demos. Really quick, I just want to make a couple of announcements before we take the last Q&A. This month, we're doing a summer pipeline promotion. So if you're interested in any of the Servoy Cloud stuff, you've been following in the product updates, but you're not yet using it, maybe you have a namespace in Servoy Cloud, but you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to get going, or maybe you had some problems. We're offering some free onboarding and configuration and consultation, so we can go and help you get your project in Servoy Cloud and set up to build automatically, and we'll kind of show you what maybe you need to do and help you plan how to use it. So if you're interested in that, please contact me or just contact the general sales info, and we'll pick it up. The other promotion that we're offering is connected to the legacy clients, which we've been announcing for some time. They go end of life next year, so 2024 LTS, when that expires, then we no longer ship a supported Smart Client, Web Client, or NG1. A lot of our customers have been in the process of moving to the Titanium client. We also have a dedicated team at Servoy that is developing tools and automations and making this process more and more tight and efficient. And something they've come up with is a way to scan your code base and kind of get a laundry list of things to look into and a kind of a general way to estimate and then also plan your work. So, and we have some automation scripts that we're working on as well for the different items in that. So even if there's a no risk commitment, if you're thinking about it and you just want us to look at your code base for this month, you can contact us and book a free consultation. We'll scan your application, give you the results, and then describe it to you and chat with you about what you're looking at to move to the Titanium version. So If that sounds appealing to you, don't wait. Get in touch with me or with sales at Servoy to have a look at that, and we can talk. No risk. Okay, I think I'm a little bit over time, a little bit out of breath, but we're pretty close. Any
bet,
final
yeah.
questions?
I'm waiting to see if any more come up. I answered a few just via the chat.
Sure.
Yeah, it's been very
Okay.
informative, though.
Yeah, I hope so. Again, the release is already out. You can find all of the release notes on docs.servoy.com for both the core and the cloud. I'm going to post on the forum the slides, the recording, and the sample solution that I showed you. If you have any questions, you can email me directly or respond to that thread on the forum. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you at the next product update.
All right, bye for now.